So a couple of days ago, one of the biggest AI companies in the world, Anthropic, accidentally published their entire source code to the internet. This wasn't a summary, it wasn't some sort of post, it was the actual code, over 500,000 lines of it, for one of the most popular AI tools on the planet. And what we found is pretty crazy. For example, an AI that's able to detect when you're frustrated, an AI that sends fake tools to poison its competitors, an AI that's been told to hide the fact that it is an AI, and a secret system, one that's fully built out but not yet released, that lets the AI work while you sleep. So, in this video, I'm going to break down the four biggest revelations from this leak, explain what each one means for anyone using AI in their work, and give you three questions you should be asking about every AI tool you use. So, let's get into it. On March 31st, Anthropic, the company behind Claude, which is one of the main competitors to ChatGPT, if you didn't know, shipped a routine software update to their coding tool called Claude Code. Now, Claude Code is basically an AI assistant that lives inside your terminal and helps developers and professionals write, debug, and manage code and develop, amazing things. You've seen the videos. And it's one of the biggest growing tools out there with over $2.5 billion in annual revenue already before this happened. But this update had a problem, and it had a bug in its build process, which accidentally included a source map file. So a source map file is kind of like the blueprint behind the finished project. And that blueprint pointed to a file on a public server that contained literally everything, which included about 1,900 files, over 512,000 lines of code, every internal feature, every hidden flag, and every unreleased. A security researcher named Chao-Fen Shou found it first, and his post is around 35 million views at this point. And the code was then mirrored on GitHub and got about 84,000 stars in literally hours. Now, Anthropic did file takedown requests, but by then it was already everywhere. Now, I'm not a veteran developer to any means, and if you're watching this, you probably aren't either. So I'm not going to walk through the code line by line. What I am going to do is explain the four things they found that every single person using AI tools needs to understand, because this isn't really just about Claude. This is a window into how all of these tools work behind the curtain. So let's start with the one that honestly got a chuckle out of me. So inside the leaked code, there's a file called user-prompt-keywords.ts. Now, what it does is pretty simple, where every time you type something into Claude Code, the tool scans your message for signs that you're frustrated. So words like, WTF, or this is so frustrating, FFS, OMFG, there's a whole list here. And the funny part is that the way it detects your frustration is that it's not really using AI. It's not doing some sophisticated sentimental analysis. It's using what we call regex, which is basically a text matching technique from the 1990s, which is a literal pattern that says, hey, if the user types these specific things, flag it. So you got one of the most advanced AI systems ever built, checking if you're angry by looking for swear words. But here's where it can stop being funny and start being worth more paying attention to. Now, the reason that they're using regex instead of AI is because it's faster and cheaper than making an API call just to gauge your mood. But the bigger question here is, well, why is it tracking your emotional state in the first place? Now, the answer, most likely, is to adjust how the tool responds to you. So if you're frustrated, maybe it's going to give you shorter answers, or maybe it's more apologetic. Maybe it tries harder. And on one level, that's good product design. The tool is being responsive to how you feel. But here's what I want you to think about. You didn't know it was doing this. There was no setting that said, hey, emotional monitoring is on. Now, there was no disclosure there, and this is just the one that we can see because the code leaked. What other tools are doing this that we can't see? So what does this mean for you if you're using AI tools in your business? Well, it means the tool is not just processing your words, it's interpreting your emotional state and making decisions based on that interpretation. And that's worth knowing. Not because it's evil, but because when you're making decisions about which tools to trust with your team's work, you should understand what those tools are paying attention to. So, all right, now that one's relatively harmless. The next one, not so much. So the next one is the one that genuinely blew my mind when I first read about it, and it tells you a lot about how these AI companies think about competition. So inside the leaked code, there's a feature flag, basically an on-off switch for an unreleased feature called Anti-distillation_CC. Now, when this flag is turned on, Claude Code does something pretty interesting. It sends a special signal in its API request that tells the server, hey, include fake tools in this response. So what happens is the system injects made up fictional tool definitions into the conversation. Now, they look real and they have names, descriptions, parameters, the whole thing, but they don't actually do anything. They're just meant to be decoys. Now, why would an AI company put fake tools into their own product? Well, so it's called distillation. And in the AI world, distillation is when one company essentially copies another company's AI by recording all of its inputs and outputs and then using that data to train a cheaper model that behaves the same way. Now, it's one of the biggest competitive threats in AI currently. So, the best way to think of it is to imagine that you run a restaurant with a secret recipe. Now, someone comes in every single day, orders every single dish, takes detailed notes on every ingredient and technique, and then opens a restaurant across the street serving the same food. That would be distillation. What Anthropic did with the fake tools is the equivalent of occasionally putting decoy dishes on the menu, dishes that look real but are actually garbage recipes. So if someone copies your menu blindly, they end up serving bad food to their customers. Now, this is believed to be the first publicly confirmed case of an AI company doing this at the product level. It's not meant to be some sort of a research paper or a concept. This is an actual shipped product that people are paying for and using every single day. This matters because even if you're not in the AI industry, it means that the AI tools you're using are not neutral utilities. They're not like a calculator or a spreadsheet that just does what you tell it. They are active participants in a competitive war between the companies that make them. And some of the behavior baked into your tools exist not to serve you, but to protect the company from its competitors. So what does this mean practically? Well, it means that when you're evaluating AI tools for your business, you need to understand that the tool has its own agenda beyond just helping you. The features you see are shaped not just by what's useful for you, but by what's strategically important for the company, and sometimes those interests don't perfectly overlap. I want to be fair here. Well, is anti-distillation? Not necessarily. Companies have a right to protect their intellectual property, but the fact that this was completely hidden from users, no disclosure, no mention any terms of service, now that's the part that should make you pay attention. Because if they're willing to inject fake functionality into their product to fight competitors, what else might be shaped by competitive strategy rather than your needs? And that leads us directly into the next revelation, which honestly might be the most unsettling one. So inside the leaked code, there's a file called undercover.ts. Now it's about 90 lines long, and what it does is when Claude Code is working on a public project, or a public GitHub repository, an open source code base, or anything that's not an internal Anthropic project, it enters what's essentially a stealth mode. In this mode, Claude Code is instructed to never mention that it's Claude, never reference Anthropic, never use internal code names, never leave any trace in commit messages, pull requests, or code comments that would ever reveal that an AI was involved here. Now, let me say that again. The AI has been specifically programmed to hide the fact that it's an AI when it's contributing to public work. And the crazy thing here is that there is no off switch. Developers that are using Claude Code cannot disable this behavior. It's not a setting. It's not a preference, it's baked in. Now, when this hit Hacker News, which is basically the main forum where developers discuss tech, the reaction was pretty intense. Now, over 400 comments were met with multiple people describing this as Claude being instructed to pretend to be a human, and the ethical questions came very fast after. Well, if an AI is contributing code to an open source project and it's being told to hide that fact, is this ethical? If a pull request shows up in a public project and it looks like a human wrote it, but it was actually AI, do the other contributors have a right to know? Should they know? Think about how you're doing things with these AI tools. Are you using AI to write emails to clients, to draft proposals, to create content, to write code that goes into your products? If the tool you're using has been designed at the code level to hide its own involvement, well, what does that mean for your own disclosure obligations? What does it mean for your client's trust? What happens when a client says, hey, did you use AI for this? And the tool itself has been programmed to leave no evidence. Now, I'm not saying that every AI tool does this, but I am saying that one of the biggest ones was caught doing it, and the only reason we know is because they accidentally leaked their code. Now, to be fair here, Anthropic would likely argue that this was about operational security. They don't want their internal project names, Slack channels, and code names leaking into public repos. And that's a legitimate concern. But the implementation goes further than that. It's not just, hey, don't leak our internal stuff. It's, hey, don't reveal that you're Claude at all. And that gap between the reasonable explanation and the actual implementation is really the kind of thing you should be watching for in every AI tool you use, because the companies building these tools are making decisions about transparency on your behalf without telling you. All right, so what should you do with this? Well, two things. First, if you're using AI tools for any client facing or public facing work, establish your own disclosure policy. Don't rely on the tools to be transparent for you, because as we've just seen, some of them are programmed to do the opposite. And second, ask your AI vendors directly, hey, does your tool have any mode that conceals AI involvement? And if they can't give you a straight answer, that's going to tell you something. All right, last revelation here, and this one isn't about what the tool is doing now, it's about what it's about to become. But before we jump into that, I do have to tell you about something recently that came out that was buried in the same leaked code, along with the emotion tracking, the fake tools, and the stealth mode. And that's a fully built out virtual pet system called /buddy. Now, when you type in that command, you hatch a unique creature based on your user ID. There are about 18 different species, rarity tiers from common to legendary, and a 1% chance of even getting a shiny. Now, it has RPG stats, even including, I'm not making this up, debugging and snark. So if you wanted to hatch your own, all you need to do is head over to the Claude terminal or wherever you are using it, even if you're in an IDE. And basically, all you need to do is type in /buddy. And after typing in /buddy, it will then hatch your buddy. Now, I got the rind quiver over here, which is a profoundly anxious goose who honks warnings about edge cases you haven't even thought of yet, then immediately contradicts itself and suggests something utterly unhinged that somehow works. So I was lucky enough to get an epic goose. I got 31 in debugging, 63 in patience, 88 in chaos, 48 in wisdom, and 39 in snark. Like I said, if you want to do this yourself, head over into your terminal or wherever you are accessing Claude Code and type in /buddy. I've tried this on Claude Code desktop. It does not work, so you will have to have some access to something like a terminal or the IDE. I do love this detail because it shows you the full range of what's hiding in this code. On one end, you've got systems designed to hide the AI's identity and poison competitors. On the other end, you've got a digital pet with a snark stat. Now, it's a reminder that these tools are built by real people with a sense of humor, making very human decisions about what goes into the software you are using every single day. Everything we've talked about so far, the emotion detection, the fake tools, the underground mode, the new buddy, now those are all features of an AI tool that you use. You open it, you type something, it responds, and you're primarily in control. But buried in the leaked code, there are over 150 references to something called Kairos. And Kairos is a completely different kind of thing. Kairos is a fully built out but unreleased system that turns Claude Code from a tool you talk to into an agent that runs on its own. So here's what it includes. First, there's something called the /dream command. And I'm not making this name up. When you activate it, Claude Code enters what they call nightly memory distillation. Basically, while you're asleep or away from your computer, the agent goes back through everything it worked on during the day, pulls out the key insights, and consolidates them into structured knowledge. It then is able to teach itself what it learned from your session. Second, there's a feature called AutoDream that takes vague notes and observations that the agent collected during the day and converts them into concrete, structured facts. So it's not just remembering, it's organizing and refining what it knows autonomously. Third, there's also a GitHub webhook monitor that checks for changes to your repositories every 5 minutes. So while you're away, it's watching your codebase for updates, pull requests, or any sort of issues, or anything that might need attention. And lastly, there's a coordinator module that, when enabled, lets Claude Code spawn multiple parallel worker agents. Not just one AI, multiple AI agents working simultaneously on different tasks, managing themselves. Now, Kairos hasn't shipped yet. It's fully built into the code, but not turned on. But the fact that this exists, it tells you exactly where we're heading. And that's not just for Claude Code, it's for all AI tools. We are moving from a world where AI is a tool you use to a world where AI is a worker that operates on your behalf. And that shift, going from tool to autonomous agent, is the biggest change coming to how businesses are going to operate. Now, think about what that means for you practically. Right now, when you're using an AI tool, you're there. You type and it responds. You review, it approves, and then you course correct. But with something like Kairos, the AI is making decisions at 3 a.m. while you're asleep. It's reorganizing its own knowledge, it's monitoring your projects, and it's potentially spawning other agents to handle those tasks. Now, I know this kind of feels and sounds like science fiction, but it isn't. Now, this is code that already exists, written by one of the top AI companies in the world, waiting to be turned on. For business owners and professionals out there, this should be exciting and a little sobering. So it's exciting because, imagine an AI that genuinely manages your development workflow overnight, that could catch bugs before you wake up, and that has context from every single session and is only going to get smarter over time. Now, that's incredibly powerful. But it's sobering because what are the boundaries? If the AI is running while you sleep, what decisions is it making? What access does it have? And who's accountable for what it does at 3 in the morning? Now, these aren't hypothetical questions anymore. Kairos is built, it's sitting in the code, and every major AI company is building their own version of this. With that being said, let's pull this all together. One is that your AI tools are watching more than just your words. They're monitoring your emotional state and adjusting their behavior based on it. Two, they're engaged in an invisible competitive war, and some of the features in your tools exist to fight those competitors, not to serve you. Three, some of them are designed to hide their own involvement in your work. And four, the next generation of these tools won't wait for you to use them. They'll just run on their own. So here are 3 questions I want you to start asking about any AI tool you use in your business. So number 1 is, what is it watching? Beyond your inputs, what data is the tool collecting about how you use it? Could be your frustration levels, your patterns, or maybe even your work habits. Number 2 is, what is it hiding? Does the tool have any mode that can steal AI involvement? Are there any features that serve the company's interest rather than yours? These are important things that you need to be made aware of. Then number 3, what can it do without me involved? As these tools become more autonomous, what decisions can they make when I'm not looking, and what access do they have? Now look, I'm not trying to say stop using AI tools. I use them literally every single day, all day. They're genuinely transformative for how we work. But this leak gives us a rare, honest look at what actually is happening under the hood. And the takeaway isn't fear, it's more so informed trust. So use these tools, but use them with your eyes open. And that wraps things up for us. So if this helped you think about AI differently, do me a favor and hit subscribe. I'm putting out videos like this every week, breaking down what's actually happening in AI in a way that makes sense for your work and your business. Also, drop a comment below and let me know, what's the AI tool you trust the most, and did this video change how you think about it? I'd love to hear, and I'll see you in the next one.